the whispering Banyan. I had never believed in ghosts or spirits. Growing up in Mumbai, I had always dismissed my grandmother's stories about haunted villages and cursed trees as superstitions, remnants of a forgotten past. But everything changed the night I visited Agora, a remote village nestled deep in the forests of Maharashtra. My friend Rohit and I had decided to take a road trip during the monsoon season. It was meant to be an adventure, a brief escape from the chaos of city life. Agora wasn't on our original itinerary. We had planned to visit the famous hill stations, but a wrong turn and a fading map led us deeper into the dense woods. By the time we realized our mistake, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and we found ourselves on a narrow, muddy path flanked by ancient trees. "There's a village up ahead," Rohit said, squinting at the barely visible sign. "Agora. Let's just spend the night there and head back in the morning." The village itself was tiny, barely more than a handful of stone houses clustered together. As we pulled into the village square, I noticed how deserted it seemed. There was no one outside, no sound except for the wind and rain. An eerie silence hung over the place, like the village itself had been forgotten. We knocked on the door of what appeared to be the village headman's house. An elderly man answered, his skin stretched tightly over his bones, his hollow eyes scanning us like an unwelcome burden. His gaze was unsettling, and when he spoke, his voice carried an ominous weight. "You can stay," he rasped, barely looking at us, "but you must not go outside after dark, and whatever you do, never go near the banyan tree." I laughed awkwardly, assuming it was just some rural superstition. Every village had its stories, right? But as the rain continued to pound outside, there was something about the way he said it that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The room he led us to was small but dry, a relief given the torrential downpour. Rohit and I settled in, trying to relax. But even after dinner, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Rohit noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah," I muttered, trying to brush it off. "Just something about this place. Feels weird." He chuckled. "That old guy spooked you. Don't tell me you're scared of some cursed tree." I wasn't, or at least, I didn't think I was. But still, something about that banyan tree gnawed at me. From the window, I could see it in the distance, its massive silhouette looming in the rain. The tree seemed ancient, with sprawling roots that snaked into the earth like grotesque tendrils. There was a feeling that the ground around it was wrong, like it was too dark, too still. "We should check it out," Rohit said suddenly, his voice too loud in the quiet room. I blinked. "What? Didn't you hear what the old man said? We're not supposed to go near it." Rohit smirked. "Come on. Since when do we believe in village ghost stories? We'll be back before anyone notices." Despite my misgivings, I found myself following him into the night. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air felt thick, like walking through syrup. The village was unnervingly quiet, and the closer we got to the banyan tree, the heavier the atmosphere became. When we finally reached it, the first thing I noticed was the smell, a sickly sweet stench of rot and decay that made my stomach churn. The tree itself was massive, its thick branches clawing the sky, its roots like twisted veins pushing through the earth. But it was what hung from the branches that made my breath hitch in my throat. Dozens of small bone totems, crudely tied together with frayed ropes, swayed gently in the breeze. Some of them were human, skulls and femurs, ribs and vertebrae, all arranged in bizarre patterns. Others looked less recognizable, misshapen, and deformed, like they had been twisted beyond nature's design. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, stepping closer. Rohit was already standing beneath the tree, staring up at the grotesque ornaments. "Creepy, right?" A sudden gust of wind made the branches creak, and I swore I heard something, a voice, a faint whispering sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It slithered into my ears, wrapping around my thoughts like tendrils of cold mist. "Leave." I turned to Rohit, panic rising in my chest. "We need to go." But he didn't move. He just stood there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. His body was rigid, like he was paralyzed. I stepped toward him, but something caught my eye. A movement in the tree. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but then I saw it more clearly. A figure. It was barely human, its body twisted and deformed, limbs unnaturally long. Its skin was slick, shiny, like something freshly born and not yet right. The face, if you could call it that, was an agonized mockery of human features, eyes bulging, mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. It hung from the branches, swaying gently with the bone totems. I couldn't move. The thing's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a sickening pull deep inside me, as though it was reaching for something beneath my skin, twisting my thoughts, my mind. Rohit took a step forward, still staring at the thing. His eyes were glazed over, his face slack. "Rohit!" I screamed, but it was like he couldn't hear me. The figure twitched, its grin widening impossibly, bones cracking as it slowly turned toward Rohit. In one horrifyingly fluid motion, it slithered down the tree, wrapping its arms around him like a lover. Its mouth opened wide, far too wide, and with a sickening crunch, it bit into his neck. I screamed, but no sound came out. Blood sprayed from the wound, splattering the tree roots. But the worst part wasn't the gore. It was Rohit's face. He wasn't screaming, wasn't fighting. His expression was blank, his body limp as the thing fed on him, tearing chunks of flesh away with ravenous glee. And then he smiled, not in pain, not in terror, but in ecstasy. His eyes rolled back into his head, his body trembling with what looked like pleasure. I backed away, my legs barely working, but the whispers grew louder, filling my ears, my mind. I glanced down at the roots of the banyan tree, and that's when I saw them. The faces. Human faces twisted in agony, embedded in the roots, their mouths open in silent screams. Some looked fresh, their skin pale and rotting, while others were little more than skulls. I turned to run, but something grabbed my ankle. Looking down, I saw a hand, Rohit's hand, his flesh melting and reforming, twisting grotesquely as his body morphed into something unrecognizable. His mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't his. "Stay with us." I ripped free, my heart pounding as I sprinted back to the village, the whispers chasing me. When I burst into the old man's house, he didn't look surprised. "You saw her, didn't you?" he said quietly. "What the hell was that?" I gasped, my body trembling uncontrollably. He sighed, his eyes dark with ancient grief. "She was wronged centuries ago. The village cursed her, and now she's become the tree. She needs the souls of the living to survive." I looked at him, horrified. "And Rohit?" The old man's eyes dropped to the floor. "He's part of her now. They all are. I fled the village at dawn, but I can still hear Rohit's voice, whispering from the roots of the banyan tree. It wants me to come back." Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey into the unknown. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with fellow horror lovers. And if you're brave enough for more spine-tingling tales, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Until next time, remember, every village has its secrets, but some are better left in the dark. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep.